She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just walked into the room and saw everything. And in that moment, Sheriff Lynn Carter didn't think like a wife or even a cop. She thought like a mother. Minutes later, her husband was on the floor, bleeding, sobbing, and no longer a man. This is the case of a respected California sheriff who took justice into her own hands and nearly got away with it. Lynn Carter wasn't just a sheriff. She was a symbol of law and order in San Bernardino County, California. With 18 years on the force, 2 medals for bravery, and the respect of nearly every officer in the department, she had built her entire identity around justice. She was the type of woman who didn't flinch during a shootout, who comforted victims at crime scenes, and who still made it home in time to cook dinner for her family. Her husband, Daniel Carter, was a school administrator, mild-mannered, well-spoken, and by all public accounts, a devoted father. They had a teenage daughter, Maddie, 14 years old, quiet, artistic, and often seen by her mother's side at community events. On paper, the Carters looked like the perfect family. 2 public servants, a bright child, a nice home, church on Sundays. But behind the white picket fence and sheriff's badge, something was festering. Sheriff Carter had been noticing changes. Maddie had become withdrawn, jumpy. She flinched when touched, avoided eye contact with her dad, and started missing school. And every time Lynn asked what was wrong, Maddie would say the same thing. "I'm just tired, Mom, that's all." But Sheriff Lynn Carter had instincts, and those instincts were telling her that something was very wrong inside her own home. It was a Thursday night. Sheriff Lynn Carter had just wrapped a late shift at the precinct, a routine domestic dispute, nothing too serious. She grabbed takeout on the way home, Thai food, Maddie's favorite, and drove back to their quiet suburban neighborhood in Highland, just outside San Bernardino. She pulled into the driveway. The house was dark. Daniel's car was parked out front. Maddie's bike was still on the lawn. She entered through the back door quietly, expecting to surprise them with dinner. But as she stepped through the hallway, something stopped her cold. A sound, faint, muffled, but unmistakable. A whimper. Then, a low voice, coming from Maddie's bedroom. Lynn's heart dropped. She didn't draw her weapon. Not yet. She crept closer. Every step felt like a mile. Then she opened the door, and what she saw would never leave her. Daniel was kneeling over Maddie, who was frozen in terror, barely clothed. His shirt was off, his belt is undone, his hands. She couldn't even process it. Time didn't slow down. It stopped. In that instant, Lynn Carter, decorated sheriff, mother of 1, lost all sense of procedure. She lunged. No words. No warnings. She tackled Daniel to the floor with a force she didn't know she had. He tried to scream, to explain, but she wasn't listening. She reached for the nearest object, a heavy glass lamp, and smashed it against his face. Blood spattered across the floor. Then she pulled out her pocket knife, and without hesitation, she cut. The screams that followed were unlike anything the neighbors had ever heard. By the time the sirens arrived, Daniel Carter was unconscious, lying in a pool of blood, and Sheriff Lynn Carter was sitting calmly on the porch, Maddie wrapped in a blanket beside her, both waiting for backup. The call came through dispatch just after 10:45 p.m. Officer involved domestic, male down, multiple lacerations, minor on scene. Deputies from the same department Lynn commanded arrived first. They didn't know what to expect, only that the sheriff was involved and a man was critically injured. When they arrived, they found a scene straight out of a nightmare. Daniel Carter was barely conscious, bleeding from his face and groin. His injuries were severe. EMS rushed him to the trauma unit at Loma Linda Medical Center. Inside the house, crime scene techs found Maddie's room in complete disarray. Clothes strewn, broken lamp, blood trails leading from the bedroom to the hallway. Maddie, silent and shaking, was taken to the hospital for a sexual assault examination. She didn't speak to anyone that night, except for one nurse. According to the report, Maddie whispered just 6 words. He said he'd kill my mom. At the precinct, Lynn Carter was brought in for questioning, not as a sheriff, but as a suspect. Her hands were still stained with blood. She was calm, clear, direct. She didn't ask for a lawyer. She didn't deny anything. She told the investigators, some of whom she had trained herself, exactly what happened, how she walked in, what she saw, what she did, and then she said something no one expected. If I could go back and do it again, I'd kill him. The room went silent. Detectives had to face the uncomfortable reality. The woman sitting in front of them wasn't just a law enforcer. She had just committed a violent, possibly premeditated assault. And yet, she was also the mother of a victim. How do you investigate a sheriff who may have saved her daughter, but broken every law in the book? That was the question now facing the district attorney's office and the entire San Bernardino County justice system. The interview room was cold, silent. Sheriff Lynn Carter sat across from 2 detectives she had known for years, Detective Carla Jimenez and Lieutenant Frank Monroe. They didn't want to be in that room, but duty didn't care about friendship. A recorder clicked on. State your name for the record. Sheriff Lynn Marie Carter. Detective Jimenez leaned forward. Lynn, walk us through what happened, start to finish. There was no hesitation. Lynn recited every moment with surgical precision, her voice flat, emotionless. I came home early, heard something, went to Maddie's room, found him, in the act. I tackled him, hit him with a lamp. I used my folding knife, targeted the groin, intentionally. I wanted him to hurt. Monroe glanced at Jimenez. You're telling us you deliberately mutilated your husband? Yes. Knowing it could cost you everything? He already took everything. She paused, then leaned in. You think I regret it? I regret not catching him sooner. They asked about her weapon, a tactical-grade folding knife issued by the department. She'd had it on her belt as always. She didn't even remember drawing it. What disturbed the investigators wasn't just the violence. It was how calmly she admitted it. No excuses, no defense, just brutal honesty. Meanwhile, Maddie had opened up to child services. Her story was horrifying. He'd been doing it for months, she said. Told me if I said anything, he'd kill Mom. Said no one would believe me because she was the sheriff and he was the good guy. Medical reports confirmed signs of prolonged sexual abuse. With that testimony and Lynn's full confession, detectives had everything they needed for both cases. But now they had to make a call that would divide the community. Would they arrest a sheriff who broke the law to protect her daughter, or would they let justice bend? For the right reasons. The DA had 48 hours to decide. News of the incident spread like wildfire. By Friday morning, local headlines exploded. San Bernardino sheriff mutilates husband in alleged abuse scandal. Hero or vigilante? Sheriff Carter takes justice into her own hands. Talk radio lines were jammed. Social media ignited. Half the internet hailed her as a hero. Mothers, survivors, activists, they called her brave. They said she did what the system always failed to do, protect the child. But not everyone saw it that way. Legal analysts warned about setting a dangerous precedent. If we excuse this, one TV host said, we're saying people can skip due process if they're emotionally justified. That's not law. That's chaos. Within the sheriff's department, officers were torn. Some refused to speak publicly. Others leaked anonymous messages to the press, saying they stood with Lynn. But not all were on her side. A few deputies, ones who had clashed with her in the past, accused her of staging the assault. They hinted it was a setup, that maybe she wanted to destroy her husband for personal reasons. The district attorney's office was under immense pressure. Protesters showed up at the courthouse. Some demanded charges be dropped. Others demanded she be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. One thing was clear. This case wasn't just about what happened in that bedroom. It was about something bigger. How far a parent should be allowed to go when the system fails to protect their child. And for the first time in 2 decades, Sheriff Lynn Carter was no longer in control of the narrative. 3 months later, the courtroom was packed. Sheriff Lynn Carter stood trial not for defending her daughter, but for aggravated assault with intent to maim, use of excessive force, and failure to follow due process. The prosecution didn't hold back. They acknowledged the abuse. They acknowledged Daniel Carter's actions were monstrous. But they argued that what Lynn did wasn't justice. It was revenge. "We are not here to judge whether her anger was valid," the prosecutor said. "We are here to judge her actions. No badge gives you the right to mutilate someone." The defense took a different tone. They painted a picture of a mother pushed past her limit. They brought in trauma psychologists. One described Lynn as experiencing a temporary dissociative break, an emotional override caused by maternal instinct and extreme shock. Maddie, now living with her aunt, took the stand. She cried through most of her testimony. "He made me feel like I was nothing. But when Mom walked in, I felt safe for the first time in months." Her words brought half the courtroom to tears. The prosecution tried to poke holes. They said Lynn had training, years of experience, tools to de-escalate, that she made a choice and not a mistake. But the jury didn't see a cold-blooded cop. They saw a mother who snapped after discovering the unthinkable. Character witnesses lined up for her. Former partners, community leaders, even a few survivors of past cases she'd solved. The trial lasted 9 days. When the jury finally returned, everyone held their breath. The verdict? Guilty on assault, not guilty on attempted murder. Sentencing deferred pending psychological evaluation. The courtroom erupted, some in cheers, some in outrage, and Lynn Carter simply stood, expressionless. Because for her, this wasn't a victory. The real damage had already been done. Sheriff Lynn Carter never wore the badge again. She was placed on indefinite leave, and within weeks she resigned. The department issued a cold, 2-line statement. "We thank Sheriff Carter for her service. We do not condone her actions." She avoided prison, barely. The judge sentenced her to 3 years of house arrest, mandatory therapy, and the permanent surrender of her law enforcement certification. No badge, no gun, no power. But for Lynn, none of that mattered. Her entire life had been about protecting people, and the one time it mattered most, the system didn't protect her family. So she took the law into her own hands and paid the price. Maddie went to live with her aunt upstate. She was withdrawn, quiet. Therapists said the damage would take years to unravel. Daniel Carter survived, physically. He underwent multiple surgeries. He would never walk properly again. He was charged with multiple counts of child sexual assault, incest, and coercion of a minor. He never made it to trial. In jail, a group of inmates, most of them fathers themselves, found out what he'd done. One night, during routine lockup, Daniel Carter was attacked in his cell. He died from blunt force trauma to the head. No one confessed. No one was charged. When reporters asked Lynn if she felt justice had finally been served, she didn't smile. "No," she said, "because I can't give Maddie her childhood back." She now lives alone in a quiet part of Riverside County. No press, no attention, just silence. But in the corners of the internet, she's become something of a legend, a symbol for parents who say the system doesn't move fast enough. She did what any mother would do, they write. She just had the training to finish the job. Court-ordered therapy sessions gave the world a glimpse into Sheriff Lynn Carter's mind, and what professionals found was a storm of guilt, fury, and grief, all tightly sealed beneath a lifetime of discipline. One therapist described her emotional state as hyper-controlled trauma wrapped in duty. Lynn had spent her career compartmentalizing tragedy, murder scenes, child victims, shattered families, always locking it away behind a badge and a uniform. But what do you do when the crime scene is your daughter's bedroom? When the victim is your child? And the perpetrator is your husband? She admitted to feeling nothing in the moment she mutilated Daniel. "I didn't black out," she told her therapist. "I was aware, fully aware. I just didn't feel like myself. I felt like every victim I've ever failed." She spoke of Maddie constantly, blamed herself for not seeing the signs. "I should have known. I did know, but I didn't want to believe it." Sessions revealed a devastating pattern. Lynn had reported dozens of abuse cases over the years and saw how often the system failed. How many girls went unheard, how many monsters walked free, and when it happened under her own roof, her mind fractured. She had one haunting, recurring dream. Maddie, 5 years old, locked in a cell. Lynn standing outside with her badge, unable to get the door open. Therapists warned of long-term PTSD, moral injury, and survivor's guilt. But Lynn refused medication. She said she didn't want to numb the fire. "I deserve to feel this," she said, "because maybe if I feel it every day, I'll never forget what I missed." Sheriff Lynn Carter will never wear a uniform again. Her badge sits in a locked drawer. Her daughter's bedroom, the same room where it all began, was stripped down to bare walls before they moved out. No bed, no desk, just echoes. And yet, despite everything, the blood, the trauma, the loss of her entire identity, Lynn says she would make the same choice again. "In that moment, I wasn't the sheriff. I wasn't the law. I was a mother, and I did what the law never could." Her story sparks debates to this day. Was she a violent vigilante? Or the rare kind of protector the system could never produce? People still argue about it online, in classrooms and courtrooms. But for Lynn, there is no debate. Because when justice didn't knock fast enough, she kicked the door in. "He took her innocence," she once told a reporter, "so I took his future." And in doing so, she didn't just scar one man. She forced the entire world to ask, what would you have done if it was your child? You've just heard the story of Sheriff Lynn Carter, a mother, a protector, and a woman forever changed by the darkest truth imaginable. Some call her a criminal, others call her a hero. But one thing's for sure. Once you hear her story, you'll never forget it. What do you think? Was justice truly served? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories that dig deep into the human mind and the moments that change everything. This is Dark Motives.